but healing is not a place that we arrive at. Healing is a journey, right? And I'm better than I was 2 weeks ago, right? Maybe. And then in 2 weeks from now, I'm worse than I was 6 months ago, right? That's what healing means and looks like for me. But all of that to say that really what has been illuminated for me is that in the first 90 days of our life, our nervous system is being wired. And during that time, our brain is only capable of knowing two things: either we're safe or we're not safe. That's it.
Welcome to the Persistence You podcast with Lisbeth. That's you as in university, but we're really much more of a community here. Lisbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
Either we're safe or we're not safe. That's it. And that's how it senses the world around us, safe or not safe. And then the body responds to what the brain is telling it.
For sisters and brothers, thank you again for showing up today, and I am bringing you a treat. Marcy Langlois is someone with her own podcast. I'm going to say it's called Beyond Limits, and I just faked that, but Marcy has her own podcast that we'll talk about in a little bit. But she is going to talk about something that means a lot to me because I didn't learn about it until I was in my later 40s. When she was a kid, she was born with a cleft palate. And while that may not be that striking to you, I think she'll tell us a little more deeply what kind of impact that had on her, both health and mental health later. I bring this up because for me, I always thought when things happen to tiny kids, either before they were born or after, if they were too young to remember some of the stuff, it would never affect them. And I still hear people say that today, like, oh, but we were separated before the kids were even 2 years old. So thank goodness they're fine today. Or, boy, they lost their parents, when they were just a baby. But thankfully, someone else stepped in and they didn't even seem to notice in their life. It's interesting what happens to us even when we're tiny children and how it impacts later. And then the really great news about that is the more we know, the more we can do to help make things better. I'm holding onto the computer because my cat's trying to topple it. Anyway, so yeah, I'm really excited to hear Marcy's story of resilience and also about her podcast and what else she's doing today. She has a pretty fabulous story. And just so you know, Oliver on YouTube wants to be seen. So maybe I'll turn the camera to him so he can get that out of his system. Anyhow, it is today that I'm recording this. It's May 13th. In East Tennessee, it is a rainy day, and we just had some tornadoes blow through very nearby in the last week. And for everyone who's going through some really inclement weather around the globe, man, I mean, seriously, hats off to all of us for continuing to move forward and to be persistent. So thank you to my patrons for your support in making this podcast available. So excited about what I'm bringing to you these days. I hope you're having a great day, and let me bring her into our conversation. As ever, will you share, review, or subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening? It helps so very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Marcy, thank you so much for being on Persistence You today. And Marcy, could you say your last name correctly? Because I might have butchered it a minute ago.
You bet. It's Marcy Langlois.
Perfect. Marcy, thank you. I would have read your stories, bits and bobs, and listened to you on other podcasts, and I'm fascinated by it. As someone who has definitely done a deep dive into how early life can frame us or shape us, I think your story is very compelling. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and then the story behind the story.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and your audience. And Yeah. So a little bit about me is I'm just going to start with the story behind the story, right? I just believe that really life is all about the journey, right? And my journey started out difficult. I was born with a cleft lip and palate that required over 20 surgical procedures to repair my face, my mouth, my nose, and my teeth. And also including speech lessons. And so the way that I look and present today is very different, obviously, than my younger years. And so you have to, as your body is growing and developing, they have to keep doing the surgeries to keep up with the change of development that you're experiencing. So the
Wow.
surgeries started when I was 10 weeks old, and my last one was when I was 17. And then in between all of that was dental care and doctor's visits, and I was sick all the time and all the other things. And yeah, I really appreciate that this is sort of the area that you want to talk about, because this is the area that has been illuminated to me in the last year, well, the last 3 years, really, that I've done all this work and all this therapy, and we've part and parceled the beginning of my life, but no one really like focused, really got in there and focused on it. And what has become very evident is that this really is the most important piece of the work in order to heal. And now when I say heal, I use that term just so that we all understand what I'm talking about, but healing is not a place that we arrive at. Healing is a journey, right? And I'm better than I was 2 weeks ago, right? Maybe. And then in 2 weeks from now, I'm worse than I was 6 months ago, right?
Okay.
That's what healing means and looks like for me. But all of that to say that really what has been illuminated for me is that in the first 90 days of our life, our nervous system is being wired. And during that time, our brain is only capable of knowing two things: either we're safe or we're not safe. That's it. And that's how it senses the world around us, safe or not safe. And then the body responds to what the brain is telling it, right? Produces chemicals that align with either safety or not being safe. And so, what that set me up for is a lifetime of feeling completely out of control and not safe. I couldn't find safety anywhere. And I didn't know for the longest time that's what I was looking for. I had no idea, truthfully. But in the last 3 years, I had a health crisis, and it pointed me down that path. And now I can clearly see that what happened to me the first 7 days that I was alive, which was I was taken from a small county hospital to the university hospital because I was born in rural Vermont, and they didn't have a lot of experience at the county hospital with my situation. So I went to the university hospital, and they ran all these tests and trying to figure out, did I have other defects? A lot of times the heart or digestive tract or whatever will be affected if you have a cleft lip and palate.
That's so
So that
interesting.
was
Yeah, I didn't know
seven
that.
days. Yeah. So the first 7 days of my life were, am I safe? Am I not safe? My body's like, I'm not safe, right? All these doctors and these nurses. My mom didn't know I was going to be born with a cleft lip and palate because it was almost 50 years ago, right? Like all
Right.
of these
Right.
things that we don't consider necessarily today. And so through all of that, and then having my surgery, my very first surgery, right on the end of in the beginning of my nervous system wiring, being wired is a surgery, a major surgery.
Mm.
Um, right. As a 10-week-old infant that weighs 10 pounds, right? And back in that day, they used to think that, oh, the baby doesn't feel this. This isn't a big deal. That makes my whole body electrified just to say that out loud.
Mm.
Um, because that's not true. Our bodies remember everything. And Bessel van der Kolk wrote a really powerful book about the body keeps score, right? And I've lived that now. I've actually walked that path and lived it. And the work that I've been doing has been so powerful because I'm going back and offloading all the fear off from my nervous system.
I love that. I mean, I think that the scary part for most of it, no, but it's because we tell ourselves when things happen to tiny children, it doesn't affect them because they'll never remember it. Maybe it makes us feel better, but, the adults in the room. But I
Sure.
feel like bad news is it absolutely matters. All those things that a lot of times people couldn't control, it does matter. But as long as we're alive, there's a lot of hope for healing. And like you said, that doesn't look like one and done, happily ever after. I reached the point, ding, 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 ding. It's a lifelong journey that fluctuates for many different reasons. But how exciting that you stayed the course in a sense and you kept moving forward. And, you shared with me it's something that maybe you want to touch on briefly, the car accident, but then, you've gone to different kind of healing modalities, but now you are really, you feel comfortable looking back and saying, here's what helped. This wasn't so much. This totally does. This is what's working for me now. And maybe it will in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my young years were filled with trauma. Lots and lots of stuff was going on in my home, lots of volatility. We didn't have any resources, no running water and no electricity for a time.
Oh, wow.
My father was an alcoholic. There was a lot going on, and I was being bullied because of the way that I looked. And all these kinds of things were happening. And then just as I thought, sort of I was going to end that chapter and get out on my own and go to college and all this thing, I got in a car accident on my way to my after school job. And these three people perished. I hit that car and they lost their lives. And yeah, there's no there's no easy way to tell that story. But that's all part of life, right? And we
Mhm.
all have our own experiences and they're all difficult in their own way. But what I found is that we all feel the same, right? Grief, sadness, anxiety, desperation, depression, whatever it is, right? It really doesn't matter necessarily who the players were in our story or where those took place, right? It's the common ground of being able to connect and relate to one another based on how we felt, these shared feelings. And so my life has been, since the car accident, a plunge into addiction and chronic illness and then recovery. And then I thought, I really thought I had arrived when I got sober. I
Right.
did. I was like, ring that bell. This is it, right? If I stop drinking, my whole life is going to change and be great. Oh,
Healing
that's
honor student, the honor student of healing. That's how I feel sometimes. Like, I deserve to be on the dean list. And it doesn't work like that.
it doesn't. It doesn't. And what I found is that it's because our stories are so multifaceted, the healing has to be too. There can never be just one thing that's going to heal me or make me well, right? Like it has to be all of it, a holistic approach, right? And so getting sober was the beginning. It was just the beginning. Had I never gotten sober, I could never have embarked on anything else because I wouldn't have had the wherewithal to do so or the capacity. But once I got sober, that was the door that opened everything else to me, all the other opportunities. But it illuminated also that I was still so dysfunctional. And all the reasons that I drank were still there, right? Which is I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel valuable. I didn't feel loved and accepted. I was in constant state of fear. And I was so angry that I couldn't change the past, right?
Mm.
So those things were all there. And now you're like, oh, you can't drink anymore, Marcy. So it's like, oh, well, that was the lubricant that was allowing me to stay in my life, right?
Mhm.
So now you take that out and it's like, oh, this is all glaringly obvious now, right? What really is going on. And that's a really painful experience,
Mhm.
but those coping mechanisms changed. So instead of drinking, then I started overworking. right? And instead of, acting dysfunctional in one way, then I transferred it to people pleasing. And then I was a caretaker. And then I was an overachiever. And then, right, like I just, whatever could get me to a place that in some way I would feel like I had any value or worthiness, right? And it just doesn't work. It
Mhm.
simply doesn't work. It works while it's working until it stops, right? And that's painful too to acknowledge. And that's all about where I figured out is like, I have to meet myself, right? I have to dive deeper. Like you say, what's the story under the story? And I had to find out what my story was. And lo and behold, 20 years of therapy, 20 years of sobriety, all of these things. And I find myself on my deathbed at the age of 45 because I've chosen to work hoping that I'm going to get accolades and value and esteem and all of these things from my job and what I do and the product that I turn out. And I was in sales. And so it's like never ending, right? Like you
Right.
can just, right? That is not good for someone like me. And so I worked myself nearly to death and ended up with mast cell activation syndrome and histamine intolerance, which just basically means the immune and nervous system are completely fragmented and perceive the world as everything is bad. Everything
Mm.
is wrong and not okay and not safe. And so you reject food, water, smells, the air outside, everything, your thoughts. And when I got to that place, um, there was no other place to go, right? I became bedridden for 40 days and I had a lot of time to really start understanding the nature of what I was dealing with. And the nature of what I was dealing with is that I couldn't control my life and that I had to learn how to fully surrender to all of it. The fact that I felt unsafe, the fact that I didn't feel worthy, the fact that all the things, right? I had to surrender and accept this is where I am. And the only way I can move forward is to acknowledge these parts of myself and do the work to go back and get that 1 day old baby from that hospital, right?
Mhm.
And soothe her, right? And give her all the love and healing that I can possibly give her today, right? And that led me to parts work, which is so powerful.
What
And
did you
that
call it?
is it's called parts work. Like
Okay.
internal family systems is a
Okay.
modality that a lot of people talk about, but that's really specified. This parts work that I use with my somatic therapist is just as soon as I identify a feeling that's coming up, like an old feeling, and I know it's old because nothing in my current surroundings is causing me to feel that way. So as soon as I'm anxious, let's say, and I'm just sitting here working, I can guarantee that that's not current. That's an old anxiety coming from I don't know where, right? So then it's practicing the power of presence with myself, asking myself, what is this? Who is this that needs my attention? Right? Sometimes I can identify who that is that needs my attention and who is a younger part of myself. Right?
Mhm.
And I can identify that. And then I soothe that part of myself. Oh, I'm here with you. I see you. I'm sorry that you're feeling afraid. Right. And I work through that. And the next thing you know, my anxiety is gone. Right.
Wow.
It's so powerful. And that is somatic work. Somatic work looks so many different ways. There's so many different modalities today for somatic work, but really somatic is of the body, right? And it's connecting to the body because
Mhm.
the body remembers what my mind doesn't, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we have thousands of experiences every single day. There's no way we can remember all of these experiences. So it's like, but we hold that emotion. Our cells remember, our tissues remember. So that's where the anxiety comes from, the depression, whatever it is, right? It's the held stuff that never had a chance at processing off the nervous system.
I like that. So you're being very mindful and compassionate with yourself as you feel emotion come out of seemingly nowhere. You don't reject them or become afraid of them or try to push them away anymore. It's more of an acceptance and compassion and keeping your own self company. Even if it was something that came about when you were much younger, keeping that person company through it, and it goes seems like it subsides.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I spent, to give you an idea, the first 7 days of my life, I spent over a year of work with a somatic experiencing practitioner to be able to address just the first 7 days of my life. That's how much my cells, my body, my tissues remembered from that period of time. And just working at that over and over. And the more work you do, then the more that's revealed, right? Because I believe it's all about creating safety within ourselves. That's what ultimately calms the nervous system, right? If you're trying to handle a dysregulated nervous system, the only way you can really do that is to cultivate safety within yourself. And in order to do that, you have to go through these practices of offloading the nervous system, the things that didn't have a chance to process off. And every time I assure myself, a younger part of myself, well, I'm right here with you. You're okay, right? I'm so sorry that happened. But here we are, right? Today, this is where we are. And that is the work, right? Over and over and over again, that is the work.
I love it. That is fantastic. And it's based, some of what you've enjoyed is based on Levine. Could you tell a little bit about that book? Or that?
Yeah, so Dr. Peter Levine is amazing. I don't know how many books he's written. He's written so many. He is on the cutting edge, world-renowned therapist. And I went to do some very big trauma work at the Meadows, which is one of the leading facilities in the country for trauma and drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I went there twice because I didn't have another choice. And a lot of the work that they do there is based on Dr. Levine's work and Pia Melody's, some other people. But that's really where I got indoctrinated. I don't know, that's a great word, but I really introduced, I think is a better word.
There you are.
To his word.
I've done a lot of work on cults and things like that. So I'm like,
Yeah, no, not indoctrinated, but introduced. And really, it resonated for me, right?
Okay.
It felt so true for me. Reading his books felt like he had lived my life. He knew, right? Like, and you could tell in his language and his suggestions, and his work is all about bringing the mind, connecting the mind and the body, right? And bringing that into integration for a complete whole person.
I like that. I really appreciate the commitment you've had to yourself also to be as honest as possible. And I think there's so many of us will run to see some sort of treatment at a low point in our life. Like, here's a huge counseling session, or, oh, I went to a peer support group. Don't ask me again. And if you're going to get serious about a healing journey, you have to realize there's no quick happy ending. And it isn't happily ever after. It's a pursuit of healing, and what works today, like you said before, might not tomorrow, but you have to keep trying until you find what does. And you're worth it. And you're absolutely worth it. And somewhere you knew that inside of you, or you wouldn't have kept on with the recovery process, which I think is terrific. It sounds like your program too, that you went to, the one that you weren't indoctrinated into, but that worked out really well. Like, what was it called?
Yeah, so I went to the Meadows, and
The
they
Meadows,
have these
okay.
they have these outpatient intensive workshops that they do.
Okay.
So you go there for 5 days, and you work with therapists that are highly trained in catastrophic trauma, and right, I mean, there's really nothing that they're not equipped to manage. So they have this very specific protocol that they walk you through, sort of like okay, so here's where we're talking from, right? This is our language we use here to discuss what your events of your life have been. And then they sort of walk you through your own journey and sort of what I call like tearing you down so that you can get to what's under the, the layers. They get to the bottom of that. Then all of this really powerful work to recover, heal, move beyond, change your perception, whatever you can possibly do. And then they put you back together and then they send you home. And that's usually the really, I thought, again, I had rung the bell and I had arrived when I left there. But the truth is that just set the stage for me to come back and work with my therapist and really be able to start doing some work. Right. Because it actually made so much stuff evident that I had glossed over.
Okay. And when you say tearing you down, you don't actually mean like they're not yelling at you or saying horrible, you know, it's not like one of
No,
those. Okay. It's just like
no.
get deeper. Okay.
Yeah. Like shedding the layers and
Good.
shedding the
Okay.
layers.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like, okay, good. They're supportive and therapeutic in all their processes, but they're making
Oh,
sure that you go deeper than, yeah. Oh, that
yeah.
sounds really nice. That sounds like a wonderful, it was a great start. And I like how you presented that. It was a great start. What you said too is so powerful. Is like, we do hold on to what do you call it? Coping mechanisms. We hold on to them. And so if you weren't drinking anymore, that is awesome. And it was okay for a while, probably thing that you had work that was meaningful or that paid that you could throw yourself into. But over time, that becomes another problem of the same ilk, really. And so it's so important to really look at, well, am I healed or am I papered over? And it sounds like you really dug deep.
Yeah, there's so much there, right? But it always comes back to, for me, what I can spot now from where I am today is it always comes back that there's a deficit in me somewhere, right? That I'm not whole, that I'm not okay as who I am. There's something wrong with me. There's something that needs to be fixed, right? So I tried to fix it with food, with work, with exercise, with playing golf, with riding my bike, with hiking, right? I did everything to an excess. People will spend, gamble, sex, what, right? And
Mhm.
it's all about this idea and perception that there's something wrong with me and I need to fill that hole, or there's so much pain in here and I have to avoid it somehow. Because how could I ever dive into that?
Right.
Right.
That
Which will
totally
keep
resonates.
you in that,
Right.
circle of just trying to chase yourself. You're like, oh, okay, work's not it anymore. I mean, it's killing me. So now I'm going to go over here and start gambling.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's just this because I can't stand to face myself.
Well, it sounds like you've found a wonderful way to not just face yourself, but to also really accept yourself. And it's
Mhm.
still a work, and we're all still a work in progress. So I really appreciate you saying that too. It is so off-putting at times to see on social media people who have programs that are like, I was like this. Now I'm like, it's, oh, really? Really? How'd you do that?
Yeah.
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 That is so fantastic. Tell us about the podcast that you have, please. And where can people connect with you?
Yeah. Thanks so much. So I have a podcast and it's just a solo cast at this point because it's relatively new just in the last year, but it's called Living Beyond Limits because that's really what I believe is that whatever limitations we were, put in our path, that we can exceed those, that we can go beyond them, we can transform our own pain. And so I believe that. So that's the name of my podcast. And then you can find me on my website at marcylanglois.com. So my last name, just so you get, well, I'll spell my whole name. It's Marcyllan as in Nancy, GLOIS.com. And you'll find
Okay.
everything that you need there. I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm pretty easy to find, honestly. But if you would be kind enough, if you're going to check me out, I'm in the middle of developing some classes because I too don't believe in, check these 4 boxes and now you're healed. I
Right.
believe that it is a journey. And so I'm right in the middle of creating a whole bunch of information and classes that will be ready later this summer. So if you just put your name on my newsletter, then I
Oh,
can,
it's
you can stay in
excellent.
touch.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, it's been a joy to meet you. And I'm really amazed with all the work that you have done and how generously you shared it with us. I appreciate it because I feel like I've learned a lot. And, I mean, none of us, I always want people to remember I'm not a doctor, I'm at all. None of us are trying to give medical or therapeutic advice, except for to say that there are so many different ways to pursue healing. And it's so important to never give up on yourself. And I'm so glad that you've kept moving forward and that now you're paying it forward. So thank you, Marcy. I loved it.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really, really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lisbeth.